Alright guys, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about the ideal player according to Rock's Imperium and domain system. Okay, so I did hesitate a little bit on whether I should make this just because some of this information I'm about to give out, I felt like I wanted to keep in-house for 2268 as we build the kingdom. But I also realized none of this should be rocket science, and if people understand the domain system, the matchmaking, the Imperium system, and really just basic math, people should be able to come to this conclusion on their own. And then second and more importantly, just because you can understand the theory or the idea behind it, you still need the leadership, the culture, and a kingdom to be able to execute it, right? So I think overall, putting this information out here is going to benefit a lot more than it hurts. And if everyone kind of has access to the same information, and then we kind of go about our way to build a kingdom, that's not necessarily a negative, right? The other hesitation I had is actually putting my boy Yar's profile picture in my thumbnail, right? Obviously a very productive player, but just, we just tend to give each other a lot more shit than praise each other. But hopefully by the end of this video, you'll actually understand why I have his profile picture as kind of like the poster child or the thumbnail for the ideal player. And, despite all the shit I want to give him, he is a very productive player, and his profile actually fits what Rock is essentially dictating to us as far as the player profile you want to a T. All right, so overview, as usual, I'll go over the basics, and then as we cover a couple different concepts, I'll be able to layer them together, build on top of each other. So if you don't know anything about this, you'll still be able to start having an idea of what it takes to build a kingdom, kind of what goes into the Imperium system, the domain system, which dictates matchmaking. Then we'll actually start talking about what type of kingdom I think has the biggest advantage to take advantage of these systems right now. It doesn't mean if you're not a kingdom that fits that profile, you can't be successful. It's just if you are a kingdom that fits a profile, you'll be able to enjoy the biggest advantages. And then finally, we'll talk about the ideal player, which essentially is Yar. But also, I'll go a step further, right? We'll go over Krakens, kind of what the profile we're looking for would be. A mid spender, which is a category I fall in, a low spender, and then free to play, right? And hopefully the big takeaway you get from that is, one, you're impressed by 2268, because this is also kind of a propaganda video, if you will. But two, understanding that just because you're not a big spender doesn't mean you can't be a highly productive player that can contribute at the highest level. All right, so first thing, let's actually go over power, right? So if you had to do one takeaway for understanding power, is that the thing that matters the most when power is true power, right? If you're a T5 player, usually about 52 to 56 million of your power is not going to really be usable in the field, right? You can make an argument that commander power maybe, but also like people have, everyone's going to have at least a set amount of commanders, right? And you can see out of the 4 powers displayed at the bottom here, the commander power is by far the lowest. We're just going to pretend that doesn't really matter in the open field. True power is the one that matters, right? Because to get to T5, you need to build a certain amount of buildings, you need to research a certain amount of technologies. And if you look for me here, right, the power that's essentially unusable for me is right around 53 mil power. And then anything above, I like right around 55 mil power. And then everything above that is going to be my true power. So right now at about 83 mil power, my true power is going to be almost 28 mil, right? If you count them as T5s, that means I have about 2.8 mil T5s to use, but I actually have more T4s than T5s, which will allow me to actually use a lot more units. This kind of gets into the whole idea of whether you should run T4, T5, or mix and all that stuff. Maybe I'll make a future video about it. Actually, wait, I already did make a video about it, right? But there's not a large agreement on that. Some people think T5 is better. Some people think T4 is better. Some people advocate a mix. We'll cover that maybe again in another video. All right. The next is to understand how do you win KVKs, okay? All the stuff that we focus on, to win KVKs, you have to actually be able to win in the open field. And if you want to look for evidence of this over and over again, you can't win KVK if you don't control the open field, right? Just because you can have the best rally or get best garrison with the best equipment, best armaments, everything. But if your side doesn't control the open field, one, it's going to be hard for your rally or garrison to get reinforced. But two, the side that's winning and control the open field could just swarm you down, right? And when they're swarming you down, right, every extra march that's surrounding whatever it's targeting, that target takes 2% more damage. So all of a sudden they start getting a big advantage. Now, if you look in this 1093 KVK, and really just like over and over again on the field, what's going on. Usually, if you just look at two balls, right, in the open field, the side with the bigger ball is going to win. Now, there is an exception to that. If you have a lot of marches on the field, but you don't at least have a baseline or minimum level of quality, then just because you have a lot of quantity, it's not going to do anything. But once you have enough quality, it doesn't have to be better than the quality on the side. It just has to be at least within range or comparable enough. Then the side with more quantity is always going to win, right? So another way to summarize this is a lot of what I'm talking about. It's keeping in mind that to win in KVK, you have to be able to win in open field. And then when we want to construct a roster or build a kingdom, you have to keep that in mind where, okay, how do I actually have the kingdom constructed in a way where we're going to be near the best that we can be in the open field, so then we can actually take advantage of winning rallying garrisons with field control, and then in turn win KVK. Okay, next, let's actually talk about the Imperium system. I literally made a video about this that went almost like 50 minutes, right? So this is going to be a very summarized version of that, right? But in the video I made, I equated the Imperium system to a salary cap. If you understand what a salary cap is, it's common in sports, right? They literally will take the salary of the players for that year and then put a cap on it. And it's a way to make the teams at least fairly competitive, where there's parity, so that one team can't just buy all the top players and then you'd be so much stronger than every other team, right? The Imperium system is kind of like that, right? Because they take the top 300 by power, and then if you are an Imperium kingdom, all of a sudden you have a very hard time recruiting other players. Like, you can't just bring in migrants anymore. You can only bring in one migrant a month via special ticket. Lilith recently announced that they're looking at updating that so Imperium can bring in more, but they haven't revealed exactly what they're doing yet. So right now, this is the Imperium system. Now, it's important to understand that the Imperium system is specifically for recruiting, right? If you're an Imperium, your migration gets limited. If you're not an Imperium, you could essentially bring in migrants until you hit the Imperium cap, okay? Matchmaking, there's some correlation, or domain system, there's some correlation with the Imperium system. But when we're talking about the domain system, we're specifically talking about matchmaking. When we're talking about the Imperium system, we're specifically talking about recruiting or migration, okay? Now, the big thing to understand with Imperium is this whole idea of cap power, right? If you look at this last paragraph over here, or really the last sentence, governors with more than 150 mil power will be calculated as 150 mil power. So that means if you have 150 mil power, you're going to count as 150 mil power towards the Imperium line. If you have 2 billion power, you'll still only count as 150 mil power, right? So if you just want to maximize taking advantage of the Imperium system, the math says you either want to be very, very lean, right? So if you're running 3 marches, you just want enough where you can run 3 marches. If you're running 5 marches, obviously you're going to carry a little bit more troop power, but you don't want to go way above that. And then you want to actually take advantage of this Imperium line by having high power Krakens that go way above 150 mil, because the more you could go above 150 mil, essentially you're getting free power that doesn't count towards the Imperium line that you can actually use to kill off in the field, right? That's just the Imperium system. Obviously, there's other systems that will impact this, but the Imperium system is dictating that you either stay very lean or you're just a super fat and high power Kraken, right? Like 1 bill, 2 bill. If you could get to 4 bill and it's only counting as 150 mil towards the Imperium line, that's a win for you. Right now, because of the domain system, you can't just keep doing that, right? But the Imperium system is saying to do that. Either be lean relative to the marches you're running, or you want to be a high power Kraken. Now, the domain system is something more recent, right? So you can see up here, the active governors. This is talking about the amount of City Hall 25 accounts in your kingdom. So obviously this is for 1093, right? And they're one of the biggest, well, they are the biggest in-game top level kingdom in the game, right? So for sure they have 3 full alliances. They supposedly have a 4th support alliance that we don't know if it's full of like all active players or not. But regardless, they have at least 3 full alliances, right? And now I was able to confirm that for the domain system, though, when they're counting this power right here, that's not cap power, that's uncapped power. So now if you have a 2 billion power player, the 2 billion is all going to go into the domain, the power that's displayed in the domain system. This distinction is very important because if you remember earlier, right, I said for the Imperium system, you want to get as above 100, as much above 150 mil power as possible. If now that whole power is going to be counted towards this power in the domain system, that's actually going to be counted towards matchmaking. Okay. And the reason why it's not a good thing when it's counted towards matchmaking is because no matter how much power you have, right, you could be 1 bill, 2 bill, 20 bill power. At most, you can still only bring 7 marches in the field. Right now, if you understand matchmaking, actually, we actually don't fully understand matchmaking, right? We have assumptions of how they do it, right? It's probably some combination of uncapped power, of City Hall 25 accounts. They probably take into KP into consideration. We don't know if they take recent KVK performance into consideration. It's this thing where it's not officially released, right? But if you just want to go by the way that the domain system looks, right, the only thing that they really display is the uncapped power. So we know that's something that's very important. And if you know, once you actually get matched up in the KVK, how do people, the content creators, usually talk about Diplo, and then what do the leaders look at, right? They're actually looking at the power of the kingdom, cap or uncap, right? They probably look at both, and also the KP of the kingdom, right? And that's actually how we decide Diplo. And then for a lot of the leaders of the kingdoms, they think Diplo is pretty even if the total power on both sides comes out to be pretty close, and the total KP on both sides comes out to be pretty close, right? But the big thing to note here is that one, this is for matchmaking, right? Whereas the Imperium system is specifically for migration or recruiting. Domain actually is how Lilith is going to help determine matchmaking, right? Now I put farms here because obviously there's no kingdom with 900 active players in the end game, right? Even 1093, the biggest kingdom in the game, at least end game, if they have 3-4 alliances, you're talking about like 465-ish active players, right? Let's just say they have 4 main alliances, which they don't, but they did, right? You're talking about a little over 600 players, right? Well, this cap is going to be 899, or I'll just say 900 for simplicity's sake, right? So how do they count the rest of these? Usually it's either going to be dead weights, or ideally it's going to be farms, right? So if they're counting City Hall 25 accounts, right, then it actually will incentivize people to have City Hall 25 farms, but then for the farms be relatively low power. Because if this is uncapped power, so basically all the power is going to be counted towards here, right? You want to put your active players into the domain, and then you want to fill the rest with as many City Hall 25 low power farms as possible, so that you can actually bring down this matchmaking power, and it'll help you get better matchmaking, right? That would make sense. So that's the difference between an uncapped and a capped power. For a capped power, right, where no matter how high you go, it's only counted as 150, you want to get as high as possible. But for this, you can imagine if the whole domain one for 1093 is 61 billion power, right? I can have 32 bill power players, and then I will be right over there around 61 bill power, right? Now the challenge, if you remember I talked about open field, is if I have 32 bill power players, they can still only bring 7 marches on the field, right? Whereas if this one, right, we talked about the alliance earlier, they have say like 465 active players, right? And let's just assume they only have 5 marches, right? 465 times 5 is a lot more than 30 times 7, which is what a 2 billion power player is going to bring. So because winning the open field is the most important thing, in my opinion, that when you're constructing a kingdom, you want to actually keep this domain and Imperium system in mind, where you can actually maximize the amount of accounts you could bring into the kingdom that could bring a lot of quality marches onto the field, so you can actually win the open field, right? Yes, it's cool to be like, oh, I have a 2 billion power player, but when you have a player that's that high power, even if they're super active and doing everything they can and killing off a bunch of troops, from an open field standpoint, they're a dead weight, right? Because for every 2 billion power player in there, right, technically I can actually bring in 20 100 mil power players that have some marches, and I would have a massive open field advantage with a lot more 100 mil power players than 1 2 billion power player, right? So that's why just from this domain system, that what the number is dictating is that you actually still want to stay as lean as possible, right? You want to be lean relative to the marches you have. Ideally, you have some marches and you just have a little bit more troops than that, so that you can fill up a whole hospital and have some troops to kill off, but then not anything more than that, right? So, for example, for 7 marches, you probably at most need like 90 mil power, right? Like at most, just to be able to still fill up the hospital and still fill 7 marches, and have a little extra where, you know, if you did need to fill like a flag or fill a rally or a garrison, or just like kind of like emergency swarm or something, you could kill it off, right? That would be the ideal. So basically you want to stay very lean relative to the amount of power you have, amount of marches you have, and then with a little bit more to kill off. And that would actually would be how you can maximize taking advantage of the domain system for open fielding. So let's talk about this whole one alliance kingdom model, right? So about a year ago now, give or take, Chizgul made an announcement that SW was leaving 1254 at the time, and they were going to go to 2605 and form a kingdom, right? And one of the main reasons he cited at the time, which actually most of it was true, was that big kingdoms are dying, with the autarch only awarding a certain amount of special inscriptions. These like 3 or 4 alliance kingdoms, you know, there's a lot of players and fighters and people that will want to get those rewards, and there's just not enough slots in the autarch to give it to them. And also, as players were retiring, right, because this game had a huge boom during the COVID era, and now, you know, after a certain amount of times, the older, more experienced, like top fighters are retiring. It's actually harder and harder for a kingdom to maintain that many alliances. And at the time, 1960 was recognized by most people as the best kingdom in the game. And 1960 was a 1 alliance kingdom at the time, right? 60 GT, we all know them. They're related to as, you know, just a alliance full of major whales and krakens, and then they're on 24/7 because they all have a bunch of pilots, so they have no downtime. Okay, the 1 alliance kingdom, since Chizgul made that video and went to 2605, I think our view on it has changed a little bit, because since then we see a lot of KVKs where these like 1 alliance kingdoms will actually get matched up with a camp with 2 or sometimes even 3 kingdoms in it. And if you're a 1 alliance kingdom, at most you have what, like 155, 160 players, and you're fighting 3 kingdoms. Even if you're fighting 3 kingdoms of 1 alliances, you're fighting 3 extra numbers, right? So to actually be able to counteract the high numbers, you need for your players to essentially be on 24/7, right? Now, the rumor / you know, conventional wisdom with 1960 is that they all have a lot of pilots. So even though they only have 1 alliance, right, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of pilots, they're essentially on 24/7, and then they're just going to wear you out, right? And when they're all on, right, they're very organized, and you know, they're objective focused and work well together, and they had a big advantage, right? But that only works if you're a 1 alliance kingdom with 1960's profile. Now, recently, I went through the experience in 2268, right? Because obviously 2605 eventually ended up migrating into 2268, and we actually raised our power in KP by a lot from that group migrating in, and we ended up actually being a pretty fat 1 alliance kingdom. And in our last KVK, we essentially ended up fighting a camp. The main opponent camp, Water Camp, had 1824 and 1900 in it, so 2 strong AC kingdoms that were able to, where 1900 was able to suppress their power enough to be considered a B seed, and then we got 2v1 in that KVK, right? And if you guys watch the KVK, right, when it was during our uptime, we were doing really well, right? So like if you think like 24 hours in a day, 12 of the hours we were winning pretty handily, for about 4 of the hours, it was pretty even or contested, where I would say we were still having an advantage. And then the other 8 hours, because we don't have 24/7 pilots, we were just getting wrecked. Okay, so we actually were winning. Like if you divide a day, divide it through 24 hours, we're winning most of the time. But when it came down to it, when you have that numbers disadvantage, and then you're not able to just be on all the time, it's easy for you to actually get overwhelmed by the numbers disadvantage. I actually think that's the main reason why we lost. It's just like from the get-go, the way the kingdom was constructed into kind of like the Diplo situation that we took. It would have been better if we actually had some quote-unquote weaker kingdoms that had more numbers that were on all the time, helps kind of supplement us, and we didn't actually have that, and it ended up leading to a very, very challenging KVK that we lost. Right, so does this 1960 model work? It works for 1960, or we'll see in this current KVK, right? But it really worked for the previous version of 1960. They were just recognized as the strongest kingdom in the game, and because of how they could be on 24/7, and they're very organized, they can make it work. But I think it's kind of time to revise or update the One Alliance Kingdom model a little bit now, right? I think the best model for this One Alliance Kingdom now will actually be 1188. So if you guys don't know 1188, they're a Korean kingdom. They're known for being probably a top 5 kingdom, but they are never in danger of hitting Imperium, just because they are able to stay extremely lean. Right now, I think there's a lot of people moving around. Right? I took the screenshot while they're literally in KVK fighting right now. But heading into this KVK, this 1188 main alliance actually got over 18 bill power. So for a main alliance to be over 18 bill power, but not be in danger of hitting the imp line, that means besides the active players, they were actually able to keep all the other accounts in the farms really, really low power. I heard a rumor that their top 300, which was going to include their farms, was like 25 mil power or less, which is very, very impressive. Right now, why does this revised One Alliance KD model work? It's because of this like domain or like Diplo, how it works, right? So if you look at 1188, are they actually, for example, stronger than 2489? Maybe, but probably no, right? But they're going to win a lot more KVKs just because of the way they're constructed. Because if you look at the domain system and you understand how kingdoms do Diplo, a kingdom like this, I don't think I've ever seen 1188 actually fight another top kingdom by themselves, right? They are always in a camp where they have a campmate, because their domain, essentially their domain or uncapped power is so low. So they always have the advantage of having a campmate when they're fighting, or 2 campmates actually, fighting some of these like top kingdoms. So they could 2v1 or 3v1 a kingdom that they could probably actually come close to matching up with on their own. But then also, if they were going to get matchmake with a kingdom that's just around their power, right? They're just very lean, but their actual fighting ability is going to be stronger, way stronger than any other kingdom that is about what their uncapped power is, right? So it's not just being a One Alliance kingdom, it's actually being a One Alliance kingdom that also is very, very lean. That will actually allow you to take advantage of the Imperium system, the domain system, and also how people do Diplo right now, right? So 1188, do I like this model? Not necessarily, because being lean doesn't actually make you stronger, right? Like if you put a stronger kingdom, like a fat One Alliance kingdom against them, and you take them one-on-one, maybe that fat One Alliance kingdom will win, but they just are almost never put into a position where they have to fight a stronger kingdom than them one-on-one, because they'll always have this matchmaking advantage. All right, so because of the domain system, because of the Imperium system as it is now, it's almost forcing, if you want to go to a One Alliance KD model, to go a very, very lean model, right? Like my boy Kane, Epic Kane, 1981, they have that model. They're very, very lean kingdom. 1900, I just mentioned in the KVK we just fought, they're a very, very lean kingdom. And there's more and more people that have kind of caught on to this and are actually going that lean One Alliance KD model. Okay, so based on everything that I just said, what is the ideal player based on Rock's Imperium domain and matchmaking system? So for regular players, so basically the non-Krakens and whales, I think it's important for you to be lean relative to how many marches you have, right? Ideally, you can run 7 marches just because if already 56 million, 52 to 56 million of those power is just going to be deadweight power, right? Uh, per player, if you can run more marches, right, you essentially could get more marches on the field without increasing the Imperium burden or the matchmaking burden as much. Whereas, like, so you can imagine if I have like a 65 million power player running 3 marches, right, or an 85 million power player running 7 marches, the 85 million power player is only taking up 20 mil more power for the Imperium and the domain system, but they're also bringing 4 more marches onto the field for 20 million more power, as opposed to the 65 mil power player that's taking up 65 mil power towards the Imperium and the matchmaking system, but they're only bringing 3 marches on the field, right? So you can literally do like a math and calculate power contributing to the domain system versus per march you bring onto the field. Ideally, you have a lot of marches, right? 2, you want those lane players obviously to be very productive. I mean, that's a given, right? Like, obviously the players have to be really productive. But the third one is that you want these players, the regular players, to actually be able to take enough deads without sacrificing open field. So I made a video about this, how many deads should you take during a KVK, and I actually qualified it as threshold 1, 2, and 3, right? Threshold 1, basically, whatever power you're at, there's going to be a power where if you're at that power, you can fill your hospital, but still bring however marches you normally want to bring onto the field, right? And I'll call that threshold 1. So for example, right now, if I'm running 7 marches, 222 archer infantry cav, and then 1 siege, that's my 7 marches. I can get to about 80 mil power and still actually fill my hospital at full tech and actually still run 7 marches. Once I start getting below 80 mil power, I'm having a hard time doing that, where I just can't do that at all. It's going to bring down the number of marches I can bring on the field. Threshold 2, in my opinion, would be where if I didn't fill my hospital, I could bring 7 marches on the field, but as soon as I fill in my hospital, I'll need to heal it before I can bring that many marches onto the field. So obviously it's inconvenience. I can't take advantage of the alliance helps, right? So I'm going to start burning through more speeds. But that's going to be the threshold 2 for how many troops I can kill. Threshold 3 is just how many troops I have, right? Like I could kill how many, like if I have 27 million power in troops, right? I can technically kill 2.7 million T5s, right? And then once I could zero myself with the troops, that's how many troops I could kill, right? You don't want to actually get to threshold 3 for sure until you're out of resources or speeds where you can't heal anymore. Because if you can heal, and we know open fielding is more important, you actually want to be able to maximize your ability to stay on the open field for as long as possible, fighting all out, right? But if you still have resources or speeds left, and you don't have enough troops anymore, then you actually mismanage your troops there. So when I'm looking at this line here, taking deads without sacrificing open fielding, that's what I'm talking about. We tend to just want to be like, oh, the more troops you kill, that's better. That's not true. You actually want to be really responsible on how you're killing your troops, right? Where you're managing it, and ideally, and this is going to be very uncommon, you actually run out of resources and speeds right towards the end of the fighting in your KVK, and then you can actually kill off all your troops, and then your side wins a KVK, and then that's like ideal, right? But that never really happens. It's hard to predict exactly when the KVK is going to end. You actually always want a little bit of troops in the reserve when you're fighting, just so you can actually be more helpful to your kingdom and be in the open field. So it's going to be a little bit different for big Krakens and whales, right? According to what I just told you guys about the domain system and the Imperium system, it's actually, you actually don't want Krakens, right? Because if you have a Kraken, for every Kraken you have, think about that like as how many open field marches you're missing out on. But the reason why you want Krakens is because if you look at the top kingdoms, usually they're going to have a swarm team, and the swarm team, they're just going to take a lot more deads, and unless you have a much higher amount of power, it doesn't make sense for you to be a part of the swarm team. So I showed Yar earlier, I think on here, let's actually see how many he has. Yar had 78 million power, right? He can't be part of the swarm team, even though his equipment's really good. I think he has 6 marches. because if he storms even a little bit, he's going to start dropping below that threshold 1, where he can't feel all the marshes he wants to feel, and then he's going to have to train a lot, right? So that's not very efficient. So because of that, right, you are going to be willing to sacrifice some open field marches, so you can have some of these bigger or higher power players that could swarm and drop a lot more power faster, because that's also important during the KVK. You just don't want a lot of those. And if you do have a Kraken or a big whale, those players better actually use those powers to kill troops. Like if you just have I'm not going to name names, right? But if you just have a really high power player that doesn't drop most of their power every KVK, that's essentially a dead weight, because now they're taking up spots where you can have a lot more players that could bring open field marches onto the field, right? Because they're there, right, it's going to impact your matchmaking. So maybe if they weren't there, you were only going to fight another camp of one kingdom. Now you're going to get 1v2'd. Or when it comes to even say like the Imperium domain system, if you're not using that power, then you're literally limiting the amount of players your kingdom could bring in. Now, having said all this, a lot of what I'm saying is only talking about really high A seed or Imperium kingdoms, right? Because if you're lower than that, your kingdom never comes in danger of meeting or hitting the Imperium threshold. And if you get like a 300 mil player, that's pretty good. You're not going to turn them away just because they're actually probably going to be more valuable than a lot of the players you could recruit anyways, right? So this is only if you're already recruiting at a pretty high level and your kingdom is actually higher power, where you're in the high A or Imperium line. This is really talking about kingdom building at the highest level, right? The other part where you need an ideal player is you need a high number of lower powered Town Hall 25 farms. And this is because then you can actually take advantage of this domain system. So once you actually pick your roster where you fill up all your active fighters, you can fill the rest with high power City Hall 25 farms. So you can actually keep the domain matchmaking uncapped power lower, right? Because if every farm someone else is bringing in, say 30 mil power, and yours is 20 mil power, then that means every farm you're actually registering here, you're getting a 10 million advantage, right? So basically for every 9 farms, if you will, that where you're getting a 10 mil power advantage, you could actually bring in a 90 million power 7 march player, and that's 7 more marches you can have on the field than the side that you're fighting, because you were able to have leaner farms, right? So that's why not only do you want a lot of farms, you want lean farms. And the reason why you want a lot of farms is because you want enough farms with your player base to at least get to this 899 number, so then you can actually choose the domain system, as opposed to Lilith just taking all the dead weights, all the rogues, whatever, and then putting them into your domain and having them counted against your power, right? And then finally, this part is really hard to measure, which is why for our recruiting migration, we always do a voice interview, because we want to kind of get a feel for the player, right? Because ideally we have this player be active in the community, right? So they're just kind of there to like, they don't just disappear during the off season, right? Like they're actually there during the off season, they're contributing, makes a part of the group. You know, if we have VC where we're hanging out and chatting, they're there. We do game nights, right? Like we do game nights in 2268, they're hanging out. It's important to keep people engaged, or if we want part of the group. So active in the community is important. Or they are like helping with leadership, right? That doesn't necessarily mean they have to take on like the biggest roles, but they just like contributing in some part to leadership that goes beyond what their stats say. They could help with recruiting, right? So maybe they have a YouTube channel. Maybe they're actually on the recruiting migration team, or maybe they're a big enough Kraken. Like, so for example, Peacekeeper, right, in our kingdom on the screen here, right? He doesn't do any migration stuff for us, but he is usually either the highest as far as like kills in the game, or second kills. And a lot of people know about 2268 or are interested in 2268 just because Peacemaker is here, and Peacemaker is super loyal, right? So like he's kind of almost like a pillar of this kingdom, and he's not going anywhere, and actually makes recruiting a lot easier, right? And then finally, just players that are willing to also help participate in like kingdom upkeep, right? So whether it's doing like one troop flags to help like get credits, help with territory and stuff, like helping like zero dead weights, just like other stuff that leadership requires. There's always like a group of like players that just like likes to participate and contribute and help out with that and see the importance of it. And those are all really, really important things. And all of these things actually go beyond the stats, right? So in general, what are we looking for? We're looking for lean, a lean player relative to their marches. They're very productive in their output. They take deads, right? But they're not taking so many deads where they can't participate in an open field. So they're actually killing just the amount they need to kill, and they're actually timing that perfectly. And then they're also maybe helping with the community, helps with leadership, recruiting, or KD upkeep, right? And having said all that, who am I describing? Yar kind of actually fits all of that to a T, right? So if you look at Yar, he's running 6 marches, right? And he's actually keeping his power right now under 78 mil. Now, if there is a time where you want to train power, you actually want to train it after matchmaking has already been done, right? Because once you're already done matchmaking, you're not worried about recruiting right now. You can actually raise your power, and that's not going to really affect anything there, right? Besides, like if you raise your power too much and you can kill it off, then it's going to actually have your power a little higher, or you'll be a little less lane during the next KVK. But you actually want to keep your power relatively low during the off season, and then you want to train once matchmaking has been done, right? And then also, if you look at Yar, I think he has about like 21 million deads right now. So on average, I'm guessing he takes about like usually between like 2.5 to 3 mil deads per KVK, which for someone that usually hovers between like 80 to 85 mil power, that's really good, right? That means he's managing this pretty well. I talked about the threshold earlier. He's definitely going past threshold 1, where he will need to heal his hospital before it's full to field all the marches he wants to field. He might even have to drop down to like 4 marches towards the end of KVK, right? But he's actually managing that really well. And then also, if you see, sometimes he's actually the king. He's doing migration for us. He's actually contributing in a lot of different ways. A player like this is essentially the ideal player for Lilith's system for building a kingdom right now, right? Now, we're going to talk about the Kraken or Big Whale model. I already mentioned Peacemaker. It's not a secret. I mentioned this on stream before. If I had to pick one Kraken that I would love to come to 2268, it would be Makote. Not because he's a soccer player or whatever, just because from the whole time I've known him, he hasn't moved, right? He's been in 1846 the whole time. And from what I understand, 1860-46 has gone through some up and downs. They obviously downsized a lot from even a year ago. And this guy could go anywhere he wants and people would take him. But he's actually stayed loyal and stayed there, which I think is very, very important. And Peacemaker is the same thing. He's been in 2268 since KVK2 and has stayed here this whole time, right? And he gets recruiting messages all the time. The other was because they're actually willing to drop their power, right? So you can see the most units Makote has lost in the KVK is 45 mil. If you count those as T5 players, he's essentially dropped 450 million power in the KVK, which is really, really crazy, right? And Peacemaker has dropped 31 mil or 310 mil power in a KVK. If you look at their highest power, right, we don't know what's the highest power they usually get to, right? But if I was going to nitpick here, let's just say for a Peacemaker, right? Let's just say he's killing 31 million units per KVK. He's not, but let's just say he is, right? I would actually like to see this number where he drops it down to maybe about like 400 mil. Right, I don't know what he is doing exactly during the off season. Right now, he's at 297 mil, but let's just say he carries around 400 mil power, right? And then he actually kills 310 mil during KVK. That means he drops down to 90 mil power. That's really, really good, right? For a Kraken like this to be able to drop under 100 mil power and then kind of build back up KVK to KVK, that means he's still a Kraken, but he's staying as lean as possible, where the troops that he is killing is actually really, really helping out the kingdom. And then also he doesn't carry around a lot of fat that he's not willing to use during KVK, right? Makote, you can see 45 mil here. If it's higher at 750 mil, and right now he's at 658, ideally for him, right, probably somewhere around like 500 mil, maybe, or 400 mil. And then he actually will just kill the units off, train more, and then kill them off again. So instead of training enough for you to kill off, you actually divide it up into a few turns just so your power doesn't go that high, right? Because in reality is, if you're at say 400 mil power, right? Like, how often is it that in a single day, right, where you have like nonstop fighting, you're gonna need to drop 300 mil power in that day, right? So ideally, you can still keep this a little leaner, but at this point, I'm nitpicking, and honestly, I have never been a Kraken, so I don't know the mindset and what goes into it. But from a number standpoint, uh, if you want to think instead of let's just say in the off season being 500 mil power, if it could be at 250 mil power, right? So essentially 250 mil power lower. That's 250 mil worth of power that I can actually bring in either as a migrant or when we're doing matchmaking, right? My matchmaking would be 250 mil power lower than it has to be, which will actually give me a more favorable matchmaking. As far as a mid-spin or whale model, right? Plato, you guys should all know, kind of fits that model too. You can see very, very productive players. If there's one player that doesn't belong on the screen, that's me. I'm not putting myself on here to compare to them. It's just our spend is all about, it's the same level. I think I spend a little bit more than Plato. Yar, I'm not sure. I'm going to guess around the same range as me. But you can see like the highest power that we've gone to is all below 100 mil, right? And for me, 86 mil was actually the highest I got to this last KVK when I was running 7 marches. And I just didn't need more than that to run 7 marches, right? And then when we're killing the troops, right, this is all means that we're killing at least a threshold 1, right? Where we're killing enough troops where we could still heal up, we could still have a full hospital and run the number of marches we need to run. And then as you kill more than that, you're getting lower. Now, obviously, Plato and Yar are a lot more productive than me for a lot longer, right? I essentially have a much younger account. I need to actually prove myself for another year and a half. Like if I keep this up and up the output maybe for a year and a half, then I'll be about this range, right? So like I clearly don't belong on the screen, but I just want to show like if I was actually looking for a profile for a mid spender or like a lower level whale, if you will, this will kind of be what I'm looking for. Is like, okay, you're running 6 or 7 marches. I think Plato and Yar are running 6. I'm running 7 right now. Do you actually keep your power low enough where it's enough to run the marches you want to run, but then you just have a little bit more to kill the troops, but you don't have too much fat? And then during the KVK, are you actually killing them off, but still maintaining your ability to find in the open field, right? And then the highest power, I kind of wish you could actually see a little bit more data here. So this is just the highest power you ever had at one time, right? So if you went really high one time, but in general, you keep it lower, it's still going to show the highest power, right? Like Plato, I don't think I've actually personally seen him at 90 mils. This is like a one-time thing, maybe like a few KVKs ago, but usually he keeps it around this like 85 mil power. Yar, you can see his highest power ever is only 89. He keeps it around like the 80, 85 mil power. Obviously for me, I keep it somewhere between 80 and 85 million power most of the time as well, right? So for a mid spend, that's what I'm looking for. Now, the reason why I actually have a big whale here and then like a whale or mid spend, because I think if you're a whale, you can actually still run 7 marches and keep your power relatively low, right? You don't have to raise the power that high. And if you want to think about it this way, so for a player like Yar right now, right? If he's going into KVK and he's running 80 mil power compared to someone with his same profile that's doing 100 mil power, right? That's a 20 mil power that he's giving the kingdom to play with when it comes to matchmaking, but also for the Imperium, right? So you do that 4 times. Now I can bring in another player that could potentially have 6 or 7 marches. It's going to give me an advantage, right? So like a lot of players with money or more money like to display their status by running the higher power, but really if you want to benefit your kingdom more, ideally you're actually going to want to keep pretty lean, right? Now for the low spend model in our kingdom, right, I think only Farmer, Bacon, and Ethan are 3 very different profile players, but they're all in that low spend category, right? So if you guys don't know Only Farmer, she's also a streamer in our kingdom. She inherited this account from someone when it had between 2 to 3 bill KP, right? So she's gotten at least 13 to 14 bill KP on this account by herself, right? And she's a low spend. You can see still a very productive player that's killing off the troops supposed to have. I think for like 1 KVK, she got her power to like 97 million power, but in general, she keeps her power between 85 to 90, and she's running 5 marches as a low spend. She's a very low spend, right? Now, something really good with Farmer too is like anyone that played in this last KVK with us, they would say she's probably one of our MVPs, right? And it's not because she's getting the most kills, like she's more than productive enough, but she's getting the door. She's like bringing a buffing march. Uh, she's just there like to help put markers. Like not only is she actually fighting on the field, but she's present all the time. She's actually objective based, and she's really helpful. And right now she's like helping with leadership. She just does so much behind the scenes besides being a player like this, right? Like I would take only Farmer over like without knowing, just like without getting into the specifics. If you give me only Farmer or you give me like a whale with 100 mil power and like 15 bill KP, I would take only Farmer over probably like 95% of them, because she is going way above and beyond, even during KVK with helping the kingdom, but then even during the off season and like running the kingdom and all the leadership stuff, she's helping out a lot there. Now, usually when we think about low spend, right, a lot of you are probably thinking more something like Bacon or Ethan's profile. So Bacon, you can see they both run 3 marches, right? So you can see the power is going to be a lot lower. Now, as I talked about earlier, if Bacon is running 3 marches with 68 mil power, right, and I'm running 7 marches with 82 mil power, right, for 15 mil more power, I'm actually bringing 4 extra marches on the field. Like it's going to help with the open fielding, right? Like we're not going to argue that. But if you are going to run 3 marches, keep your power lower relative to the marches you're running. And you can see even like the highest power he's ever gotten to is 71 mil. We've had a little longer off season now, so I think people tend to be a little higher in power just because of all the waiting. But Bacon is active all the time, right? So he's very active in the communities and the game night. He's also part of the leadership team. Whenever leadership asks for help with a lot of things, he's always like volunteering. He's very productive. And even as a player, right, with 3 marches and the low power, this is someone like I would take any day of the week to be in the kingdom, just because per like player, he's going to actually be contributing a lot in different ways beyond fighting, and he's already more than good enough as a fighter as a low spend. And for example, I have 8 farms, right? Yar, the rumor is he has like 40 farms. Not the rumor, he actually has 40 farms. I think Plato has around the same amount of farms as me. Farmer has a lot more farms than me. Bacon, I think, has like 11 farms or something. I'm going to guess Ethan has more farms than me, right? So not only are they just on their main very productive and also helping out in a lot of different ways, but also they also have a lot of farms, which kind of ties into the domain system I was talking about earlier, where you want to be able to register like lean City Hall 25 farms to help with the domain system, right? Now, Ethan, kind of similar to Bacon, right? You can see like per KVK, this last KVK, he actually, I think, did the best he ever did. So he's more than productive enough. This is, I think, about 900 mil to 1 bill KP. His power, if I had to nitpick a little bit for 3 marches, is probably a little high, right? Ideally, you probably want to see that at about like maybe like 65 going into KVK. And then after that, train it up, fine, but then just kill it off, right? But Ethan is also on the migration team. So in migration right now, there's 4 of us. I would say that actually, since I've been on the team for the last month, me and Ethan have been the most active there. And he's been really helpful, and he's the same way. A lot of other stuff, when leadership asks for help, he'll step up and do it. These players are like invaluable to the kingdom, and if you just look at the profile or the stats here, it doesn't really get the full picture, right? We don't even know how many farms there are just looking at the stats. And then finally, the F2P model, right? We have 2 F2P. Well, Sox technically is on loan right now to 1818 because he wanted to fight in the 960 1093 KVK, and he's going to come back after this KVK is over. But you can see the 2 profiles for these are very different. Taki right now actually is holding King and 2268. So you can see like she's productive enough, right? She also runs 5 marches. I don't know if I covered this. Farmer runs 5 marches. Bacon and Ethan run 3, right? But you can see the power level reflects the amount of marches they're running. Taki also runs 5 marches. And she usually carries around this like 70 something mil power. So she's very lean, the power she carries. Now, the power of Taki, besides doing all the helping out with the leadership stuff, is she has a lot of really good farms, right? So if you look at the farm deads, now she's like taking like 20 mil farm deads, right? Which is what a Kraken would do, but she's actually contributing that on a farm as a free to play. And besides the leadership stuff, right, like it's just super valuable. And then Socks, uh, you can see is probably the most productive free-to-play player in the game, right? So as a free-to-play with a relatively young account, he already has over 11 bill KP, and you can see like his numbers, even a lot of whales or like what we consider highly productive whales don't even put up these numbers, right? So he runs 4 marches. Again, nitpicking a little bit. If you're running 4 marches, I would actually probably keep that number around like 75 mil or lower, since he's not necessarily killing off a lot of troops, right? So he's probably a little like about 8 mil, maybe 9 mil, a little bit too fat. But honestly, for a player like this, like that's like very, very minor. It's just nitpicking. Like someone with Sox's profile is going to be like a huge addition to any kingdom. Sox also makes YouTube videos, right? And funny enough, uh, we actually get quite a few people that are interested in 2268 because of Sox, right? And like we kind of joke like, what? I don't understand, but you know, like he helps with migration, right? So every one of these players, besides just their profile, right? From Plato, obviously you guys know him, helps raise a profile of the kingdom with migration and everything. Yara's on the migration team, helps with leadership, and then it just like and also like just very productive. Farmer, obviously, YouTube helps with the profile of the kingdom, helps with leadership, very productive. Bacon helps with like leadership stuff, running the kingdom, very productive for a low spend. Ethan on the migration team. Taki, free to play, helps with leadership. Also, actually has a YouTube channel. And then Sox helps with migration, very productive on his own. And also, like the big thing is like none of these players are actually carrying power that is like way more than what they should be, right? So they're very lean and they're actually helping a bunch of different ways. So again, another long video. Maybe this is the new norm, right? Videos over 50 minutes. But if you watch all the way in yet, you haven't, please like the video. It really helps out the channel. And the next video I'm going to make, we're going to actually talk about migration, specifically for 2268. So look out for that. And again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.